The whole road trip started as a way to escape. Eric and I were both fed up with our boring daily lives. Endless hours at work, the same weekend routines, and the city feeling like a concrete cage. One night over a couple of drinks, we made a spur-of-the-moment decision to just get away. No planning, no stress, just the open road and whatever small towns we stumbled upon. We packed light, threw our bags in the back of my old SUV, and hit the highway at dawn the next day. The first few hours were pure freedom. The city skyline melted away, replaced by winding roads through forests and vast fields, stretching out as far as we could see. We passed farms and gas stations that looked straight out of the 80s. Everything about the trip felt right. We had been driving for hours, and the sun was starting to set. Eric had been asleep in the passenger seat for most of the drive. I think he was pretty hungover from the night before. Leaving me alone with my thoughts and the quiet hum of the tires on the pavement, I kept glancing at the map, realizing we hadn't passed another car in over an hour. Just empty fields and an occasional farmhouse in the distance. "We need to stop soon," Eric said, stretching as he woke up. "I'm starving." I nodded, starting to look for somewhere to stop. Before long, a flickering neon sign caught my attention. Rusty's Motel. The sign blinked on and off, barely lighting the rundown building behind it. It wasn't ideal, but we needed a break. The motel was a small, dingy place with peeling paint, a cracked parking lot, and what looked like a handful of guests. We pulled up to the office, where an old man sat behind the desk. He barely looked up from his newspaper as he slid a rusted key across the counter. We parked near the back of the lot, where our room overlooked a large, empty field. As we unloaded our bags, I noticed something. A scarecrow standing in the middle of the field. It looked old and worn down, but something about it just really gave me a bad feeling. "Creepy, huh?" Eric said, noticing it too. "Just like those horror movies we used to watch." I forced a chuckle and followed him inside. The room was exactly what I expected. Musty, dim, and just clean enough to not feel completely gross. We grabbed some snacks from the vending machine and settled in for the night, flipping through the channels on the tiny TV. But I couldn't stop thinking about that scarecrow. The next morning, I woke up early, the sun just barely rising. Out of curiosity, I peeked out the window to check the field. The scarecrow was still there, but something was different. Its head, which had been slumped down the night before, was now tilted upward, as if it were staring straight at me. My stomach dropped. I rubbed my eyes and looked again. Maybe it had been like that all along, and I just hadn't noticed. I shook off the feeling and went about our day. We grabbed some breakfast at a diner down the road and decided to take a hike through some nearby trails. It was a good day, quiet, peaceful, and exactly the kind of break we needed. But when we got back to the motel that evening, the scarecrow's head had moved again. I mentioned it to Eric, but he just laughed. "You're paranoid, man. It's probably the wind or something." I tried to let it go, but I just couldn't. I was sure I wasn't seeing things. Soon enough, I kind of forgot about it and fell asleep watching some movies. I woke up in the middle of the night for a drink of water. On my way to bed, I looked out the window and froze. I could just see it in the little amount of light. The scarecrow's head had turned again. This time it was facing our room directly. "I swear it wasn't like that before," I whispered, waking Eric. He groaned and joined me at the window. "Okay, that's creepy." We sat there in silence for a moment, both of us just staring at it. Neither of us could explain it, and neither of us was willing to go out and check. I tried to convince myself that maybe we were imagining it, that maybe it had always been facing this way. We ended up blowing it off as being the wind or something, but I think we both know there was something going on. The next day, after little sleep, we decided to leave early. The place had started to feel off in ways we couldn't explain. As we packed up, I looked out at the field one last time. The scarecrow hadn't moved, making me a bit relieved. We loaded up the car and checked out of the motel, but as we drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that the scarecrow was following us somehow. We didn't talk much on the drive home. Both of us were too freaked out by the weirdness of the past few days. We moved past it eventually, and it's one of our top stories when we are at occasions now. But it does still keep us up some nights.